The IDF is expanding the security operations in Judea and Samaria to Tulkarem, eliminating the Hamas commander in Nur el-Shams with an airstrike. It's day 7 of Operation Iron Wall in Samaria, and things are heating up fast. The IDF is discovering and dismantling a vast network of terrorist infrastructure under the leadership of the Hamas Jenin battalion, which has been a magnet for angry young men from all over the region. It's also been a magnet for Iranian money, weapons, and advice. But now, this network, which took years to assemble, is all being rooted out at a lightning speed. On Israel's northern border, Hezbollah is saying that it does not accept an extension of the ceasefire agreement that Israel and the government of Lebanon negotiated under the American auspices. In the pre-recorded speech by Hezbollah's Secretary General, his fear of Israel is apparent. However, the IDF has also said that the era of quiet in exchange for quiet is over, and they are drawing a new security map in northern Israel. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Hamas continues to talk about the great victory they've won over Israel, but Gazan residents returning to a northern part of the Strip can see that their cities and villages are totally destroyed. They are moving north quickly on foot via the Netzarim route, and the IDF has little ability to check if anyone is moving weapons. But there is an American private security contractor who is checking vehicles for weapons using dogs and electronic monitors. The contractors are veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan who have received special training in how to manage inspections. Regarding the ceasefire agreement and the matter of Israeli hostages, in the last 24 hours, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group released footage and proof of life from Arbel Yahud ahead of her scheduled release this coming Thursday, along with Agam Berger and another hostage as part of the agreement that was reached between Israel and Hamas. In a related story, new evidence is coming to light about the conditions the female hostages were kept in during their captivity in Hamas terror tunnels. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 480 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and the armed groups in Judea and Samaria. All of them are taking their orders from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to invite you to click on that subscribe button if you haven't already, to stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss an episode of Boots on the Ground. I also want to tell you about our sponsor for today's video, Magen David Adom, Israel's medical first response team. They save lives in Israel every single day, and their entire budget comes from donations. We'll talk more about them in a moment, but first, the news. On day 7 of Operation Iron Wall in Samaria, an Air Force aircraft struck a vehicle in Nur el-Shams refugee camp in Tulkarem at midday on Monday as part of a joint activity by the IDF and the Shin Bet. The Palestinian Health Ministry reported that in the strike, the commander of Hamas's El-Qassam brigades in the camp, Yab Abu Atayaw, was eliminated, and this was later confirmed by the IDF and the Shin Bet. 3 additional terrorists were moderately and lightly wounded and were taken to the government hospital in Tulkarem. Footage from the scene shows the vehicle engulfed in flames. Since the start of Operation Iron Wall early last week, reports say 2 Hamas El-Qassam brigade commanders in the camp have been eliminated, as well as the commander of the Jenin brigade affiliated with Palestinian Islamic Jihad. An hour after that strike, another strike was carried out targeting several suspects who had planted explosive devices in the refugee camp area. This is as part of the operation in Tulkarem, and large IDF, Shin Bet, and border police forces are active in the refugee camp. The goal of the operation is to shape the space and neutralize terror infrastructures. According to the IDF, at least 16 terrorists have been neutralized and many more wounded, while large quantities of weapons and ammunition have been discovered and demolished so they can be used for future attacks. Workshops for making bombs and improvised explosive devices have also been demolished. Several suspected terrorists have also been arrested and interrogated, and the information they provide is used for locating more terrorists and infrastructure. Many units are operating inside the camp to flush out the terrorists and demolish the infrastructure and weapon stockpiles they've spent the last few years preparing and storing. The operation is expected to last for a few more weeks and is a continuation of efforts to clear out the terrorist threat from Judea and Samaria, which have been ongoing for most of the past year. A security source explained that in the week since the operation began, a great deal of progress has been made, but it takes time to do this job correctly. No one should expect this operation will be completed soon, or that it will be easy or without setbacks. He also explained that it is not just a matter of looking for terrorists and taking care of them once they are found. They are also building roads and clearing large quantities of debris from the area so that the IDF can even begin operating there using heavy equipment. He added that while in the past the mission was to simply manage the problem, this time the mission is to completely eliminate the Hamas battalions in Judea and Samaria. Using knowledge and experience gained at great cost fighting Hamas in the Gaza Strip, they are removing obstacles more quickly, finding the terrorists and their infrastructure and systematically clearing it out one day at a time. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on every development in our hottest sector, Judea and Samaria. And as always, we ask you to help us by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and most importantly, click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we switch our focus to the northern arena, as it is the second day of clashes in Lebanon at sea, while the IDF confronts Hezbollah fighters trying to return to southern Lebanon. On Sunday, Hezbollah tried to force a unilateral return of residents to their villages in southern Lebanon, and the IDF's strong response had an impact. Under the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon, the IDF was supposed to withdraw from the border area on Sunday, while the Lebanese army would deploy in place of Hezbollah fighters. However, because the Lebanese army did not arrive in the area, the IDF refused to withdraw for fear a vacuum would form and be filled by Hezbollah terrorists. On Monday, it was reported that in coordination with the Americans, the ceasefire was extended until February 18. According to reports, negotiations may also be held regarding the release of Hezbollah fighters who were captured during the recent clashes. However, in the border areas of southern Lebanon, intense Hezbollah activity is evident. The organization's flags can be seen in Shiite villages that have become bases for terror groups, and local residents are publicly showing support for them. El Manar TV, Hezbollah's station, is also encouraging the protests and riots in that area. Despite expectations that the Lebanese army would curb these violations, it appears they have not succeeded. Accounts from the field indicate that in some cases, Lebanese soldiers were alongside IDF soldiers, while in other places, they were seen next to the protesters, but doing nothing to interfere, raising doubts about their performance. The events in southern Lebanon reflect Hezbollah's efforts to rebuild its standings after sustaining severe blows to its leadership and military capabilities in the last war. Members of parliament affiliated with the organization are also visiting the area to try and rally their supporters. All of this has led Israeli intelligence agencies to assess that this ceasefire will continue to be fragile and that there will be many violations that fall short of a total return to active hostilities. Security sources point out similarities between the agreement with Hamas in Gaza and the current ceasefire agreement with Lebanon, emphasizing that these terrorist organizations are not trustworthy and their behavior can be expected to be very erratic and unpredictable. For instance, Hezbollah found itself in an embarrassing situation on Monday evening when it broadcasted a pre-recorded speech by Deputy Secretary General Naim Qassem opposing an extension of the calm 1 day after Lebanon had already agreed to extend it. The mistake reveals that the speech was recorded beforehand, prior to Lebanon's decision, and was aired anyway without editing. It includes some mistakes that might be humorous if the situation were not so dangerous. Qassem also addressed the blow dealt to his organization, stating, "Our audiences did not expect us to lose a large number of our leaders in such a short period. The exposure of information, the enemy's control of communications, and its air force are among the factors that influenced the strikes aimed at us." In related news, the Christian Phalange Party in Lebanon, known as a fierce critic of Hezbollah, condemned the marches that the terrorist organization held, stating, "Hezbollah returns to its old method based on internal bullying, spreading chaos and undermining stability after the failure of all its political and military gambles and the collapse of empty slogans." The marches organized by Hezbollah carry sectarian slogans and blatantly provoke civilians. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on everything happening on the northern border with the Hezbollah terrorist organization in Lebanon, which is trying to rebuild, and in the process, ruining Lebanon's chance to become a functional state. A moment before we move on to the Gaza Strip and the continuation of the ceasefire and the hostage release agreement, I want to tell you about our sponsor for today's video, Magen David Adom. For the last 15 months, Magen David Adom has been working hard to help these hurt by rocket attacks, terrorism, and everyday emergencies. They provide first aid to all people, regardless of their faith, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and anyone else in need. Whether it's treating injuries or helping women give birth, these volunteers are always ready to help. But their work never stops. They need donations to keep going. Medical supplies are used up quickly, and training for future emergencies is constant. If you want to help their efforts, please donate at www.savelifeisrael.com. Your support saves lives. Israel needs Magen David Adom, and they need you. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the news. Israel announced on Sunday night that an agreement had been reached in which Arbel Yaoud will be released on Thursday, along with Agam Berger and another hostage, and on Saturday, 3 more living male hostages will be released. Israel estimates that the hostage to be released on Thursday is Keith Siegel, among other indications from an earlier report on NBC. In addition, Hamas blatantly transferred the list regarding the status of the remaining 26 hostages set to be released under Phase A of the deal, as it was obliged to do so under the agreement. In return, Israel opened the Netzarim route on Monday morning, which was supposed to be open on Saturday, but remained blocked after Arbel Yaoud was not released in the second phase, thus allowing Gazans to return north in the Gaza Strip. Hamas tried to project a narrative of victory, but Gazans returning to the northern part of the Gaza Strip found only destruction and defeat. From 7 a.m. to noon, hundreds of thousands of Gazans already crossed into the northern Gaza Strip along the Netzarim route, with endless convoys of people continuing to pass via the El Rashid Road. Tens of thousands have already reached northern Gaza, with some traveling in vehicles. Under the hostage release and ceasefire agreement, it was determined that those walking on foot would not be subject to inspection, only vehicles moving north. And this is carried out by an American private security company. The contractors from this company are mostly veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan with extensive combat experience, and some speak Arabic. They stand at the checkpoints armed and equipped for the task of inspecting the vehicles, and their main goal is to prevent weapons from being brought north into the northern part of the Gaza Strip as they pass along the Salah el-Adin road via the Netzarim corridor. They have specialized equipment including shipping container X-rays, dogs trained to sniff for explosives, and other equipment. Hamas police forces are also involved, providing perimeter security to keep the area where the inspectors are carried out clear of foot traffic, and the IDF is also deployed nearby, keeping an eye on everything. It is not entirely clear what the legal status of these security contractors would be if they are forced to open fire, but they declare their neutrality and are committed to long-term stability in Gaza. A senior Israeli source stated that this crossing, which Israel set as a negotiation condition, is intended to prevent heavy weaponry from being moved north. Later, the EU force EUBAM is also expected to be deployed at the Rafah crossing as part of the ceasefire agreement. According to the predetermined plan, this is a scene that will be repeated as the IDF withdraws from special areas inside the Gaza Strip in stages, clearing Salah el-Adin Road and the Philadelphia corridor on designated dates if fighting does not resume. Neutral forces will be deployed in these areas to do specific security-related tasks, once again operating according to a predetermined plan. Meanwhile, another task that has only just begun is clearing the rubble and debris from the cities and villages in northern Gaza, where the most intense fighting has happened over the past 15 months. Gazan residents who evacuated these areas at the beginning of the war are hoping to return to their homes this week, but they have discovered that they have nothing left to return to, and this has spoiled the attempt that Hamas made to project an image of victory in this war. In footage published on social media, Palestinian women can be heard cursing Hamas, shouting, "May Allah burn Hamas's heart, may Allah destroy them." Many other residents have expressed similar sentiments, as these people seem to know exactly who to blame for the destruction of their homes. Meanwhile, the IDF's 99th Division has finished repositioning in areas still designated as the Netzarim corridor. The forces remain deployed according to the ceasefire agreement and will act if the understandings are breached. Currently, the IDF says there have been no unusual incidents. Now, some things need to be made very clear because there is a lot of talk about recent events floating around, and I want you to know the truth. The positive turnaround that has taken place over recent days regarding the ceasefire deals in both Gaza and Lebanon, as well as the status of the hostage release schedule, stems from a combination of several main factors. Chief amongst them is the aggressive involvement of the Trump administration and the Israeli position that proved to Hamas and Hezbollah it intends to enforce the agreements exactly as written, with no compromise and no tolerance for violations from the other side. The main reason Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad organization agreed to move forward with these agreements is their desire to reach stage B of the deal, where Israel, under American guarantees, commits to completely ending the war. This is Hamas's ultimate goal, as it greatly fears that Israel is determined to renew the fighting. Negotiations on Stage B are supposed to begin on Tuesday of next week, which is day 16 since the agreement took place. If Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are persistent in insisting Arbel Yehud be released only on Saturday, the date would have been postponed. It must be remembered that the first humanitarian stage from the terrorist group's perspective is merely meant to open the way to the main objective, which is ending the war. Another reason the two organizations softened their stance is pressure from Gazan residents close to 1 million people who want to move north in the Gaza Strip to see if they can return to their homes or what remains of them. This pressure is extremely heavy, and Hamas understands it could face a revolt. A third reason is that Hamas and Islamic Jihad very much want to evacuate the wounded terrorists for treatment in Egypt and other Arab countries, and Israel has made clear that this will not happen until they meet their obligations. The surprising agreement from Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad to add an unusual additional release beyond those stipulated is a kind of mini deal that the Qatari Prime Minister arranged by exerting pressure on all sides and primarily on Hamas, which has lost most of its leadership in this war. It can be assumed that the surprising flexibility shown by the terrorists also stemmed from fear of President Trump, or more accurately, the Palestinians' fear that the United States president indeed plans to deport half of the population of the Gaza Strip, turning hundreds of thousands into refugees for many years in Jordan or Egypt. The Trump effect worked in this case to Israel's advantage. The only concession Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made was opening the channels in the Netzarim corridor, allowing Gazan residents to move north. The return of the displaced is not the only significant pressure lever Israel has at this stage. There is also the opening of the Rafah crossing for wounded people to pass. The humanitarian aid whose flow into Gaza Israel controls, and if the agreement is blatantly violated, the IDF is still in a position where it can easily maneuver anywhere required, and we have not yet mentioned the Strip's reconstruction, which belongs to a third stage, and the political arrangements. Another question that hangs over all of this is about who will rule the Gaza Strip administratively in place of Hamas the day after. This is the critical stage of the deal, and that is where Israeli citizens will know whether they will see the hostages returning or whether they are doomed to a drawn-out ordeal. It's also important to clarify that the IDF is still in parts of the eastern and central Netzarim corridor, as well as on the Philadelphia route, and in the security perimeter within the Gaza Strip adjacent to the Israeli border. As stated, this means that the IDF brigade and division battle teams can reach any point in the Gaza Strip within a few hours, and this provides Israel with a significant lever for exerting pressure on Hamas if it needs to. The IDF can also, if necessary, order the residents of Jabalia, Bet Hanun, and Bet Lahia to move south again if required. Therefore, among the options available, everything that was open to the IDF before the Gazan displaced returned to northern Gaza should remain open now as well. We have more to talk about regarding the upcoming releases of hostages and other aspects of the ceasefire agreement, but before we get into all of that, I want to remind you that at TBN Israel, we need you to keep helping us spread the truth. If you like what we're doing here in Israel and want us to continue, you can donate to us via the YouTube donate button or go to our website at tbnisrael.com/give. Every dollar you give us will be invested in creating more videos from Israel. Now, back to the news. As the Palestinian Islamic Jihad organization published footage and a sign of life from hostage Arbel Yahud on Monday, she's supposed to be released this coming Thursday, along with Agam Berger and another kidnapped man who is still alive. Arbel's family has not yet approved the publication of the video. She was supposed to be on the list of names to be freed in the second phase of the hostage deal, but in the end, she was not released, leading to a crisis in the agreement between Israel and Hamas, which claimed that they did not have direct control over her. This is because she's being held by the El Nasser Salah el-Din brigades, the military wing of the Popular Resistance Committees, which is considered the third largest terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. Hamas needed to negotiate it with them as well as with Israel in order to secure her release. To give some background, the El Nasser Salah el-Din Brigades has a Salafist jihadist ideological bent, which is much more extreme than even Hamas. Negotiations with them are not simple, as they do not have the same goals as the other terrorist groups, and they do not even place a high value on their own lives. So it's also very difficult to threaten them with anything. But in the end, somehow Hamas found a way to convince them to release their hostage, and we look forward to seeing her back in Israel on Thursday. Here at TBN Israel, we will bring you a live feed of the release of Arbel and the other hostages, so click on the subscribe button if you haven't already to receive notifications and make sure you don't miss it. Now, we're not done talking about the issue of the hostages just yet, because on Monday, the Deputy Chief of the IDF Medical Corps held an online press conference in which he revealed details on the condition of the freed female hostages and how they were held in captivity by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. According to his report, some of the female hostages were held in Hamas tunnels for up to 8 consecutive months with no daylight and almost no human contact. Some of them remained in the tunnels for the entire duration of their captivity. It is remarkable that so many of them survived this ordeal and that they are still as healthy as they are. But there is also evidence that in the days and hours before the release, Hamas gave them special food and medication to try and improve their appearance so that when they were released, it would look like they were well treated. Meanwhile, United States President Donald Trump makes no secret of his aspiration for the migration of Palestinians to neighboring states and continues to exert public pressure on regional leaders to advance this. In the last 24 hours, he addressed the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip under the agreement signed between Israel and Hamas, saying, "I'd like the Palestinians to live in an area where they can lead their lives free of disruptions, revolutions, and violence." Responding to reporters before boarding Air Force One, Trump added, "Looking at the Gaza Strip, it's been a hellhole for so many years. Gaza has always been associated with violence, so I think we can get the people to live in places that are much safer and maybe even much better and more comfortable." He went on to say that he spoke with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, but refused to state directly if he expressed an opinion on observing the Palestinian refugees in Cairo. Predictably, the reaction to this suggestion is that Trump has been accused of trying to help Israel ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip of its rightful Palestinian inhabitants. Personally, I'd be interested of hearing what the ordinary Palestinian Gazans residents who Trump would like to move to other countries think about this idea, instead of just hearing from those who claim to speak on their behalf. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on what's happening in Israel, and we ask you to keep praying for the safety of our hostages who are held in the Gaza Strip by the Hamas terrorist organization. Keep praying for the IDF soldiers wherever they are, if they're fighting in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, or in Judea and Samaria. Pray for all the civilians that are affected by this war, by these terrorist organizations, that they will seek you, God, and pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and together we will win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.